Okay, folks, we are here today to talk about 8 ways to avoid common HR sand traps today. And, in my experience, a lot of leaders think about HR as the stuff that the folks in HR do. And really, human relations, human resources, it's all stuff that every leader in the organization needs to concern themselves with. And I've been in countless companies now where, uh, what I've seen are uh, common HR best practices just aren't. They just aren't best practices. They're common practices. Uh, they're historical practices, and in my experience, they often interfere with effective communication, interfere with morale, interfere with the kind of human people centric place that so many of us come from. Today, I am honored and excited to have Angela Chang-Simony with me. She is the CHRO of Harvard Business Publishing. And I know so many of us are reading Harvard Business Review articles all the time. I love the publication. And in the little bit of interaction, Angela, that you and I have had, I've come to love you and your perspective, and I'm thrilled to have you with us. Would you take a moment, please, and introduce yourself?
Yeah, Aaron, thank you so much for giving this space to me to interact with you and with your community. Angela Chang-Simony, I'm a 30-year HR professional. In fact, I studied it in school and loved the curriculum and have never looked back. I've been in generalist roles, I've been in startups, nonprofits, companies on the ascendance and companies in decline, but always in HR. It's my calling.
Beautiful. All right. Well, we are here to talk about these HR sand traps that you can avoid today. And so I'm excited, Angela, to hear what is the first HR sand trap that you are going to help our viewers avoid.
Well, I think it dovetails really nicely, Aaron, into what you started with. So my first sand trap is that HR practitioners fail to learn the business. And they come at their agenda strictly through the lens of human resources. Mm. And what I have learned since my very first job in HR is that we absolutely need to be a business partner, not in the sense of HRBP, but just business partner. Mm. You need to know what your competitive set is. You need to know how you make money. You need to know how you lose money. You need to understand the skills and capabilities that are required for success. You need to know what the key business metrics are, so that then when you're challenged to solve problems through the lens of people strategy, it is innately and inherently entwined with what's important to the business.
I love that. And it's so important, I think, because we hear, and I'm sure you've heard this, HR people complaining, rightly, for the most part, that they don't have a seat at the table. And it's this kind of developing of business savvy, generally speaking, and then also really specifically about the business that you're in. When you've got the business savvy, it is so much easier to earn and keep a seat at the table.
100%. Yeah, I mean, business and financial acumen is as key to understanding how to design a performance management process or how to attract great talent, right? That is the foundation, because only then can you then deploy, all the good bits, the stuff that we love to do day in, day out.
Terrific. Okay, well, I couldn't agree more, and so I will move on to my first suggestion for the people, which is a significant pivot from that. Beware being a savior and intervening. One of the HR functions, of course, is helping to manage the relationship in your company, to get in there when there's conflict and when you're needed. And if you're familiar with that drama triangle, or even if you're not, stepping in between adults who may be not behaving like adults is not the go-to first move in my book. The go-to first move is to encourage them to work it out for themselves. Who is it? Her name is Cy Wakeman, has this wonderful question that she asks when people come to complain to her about somebody else. She's got 2 of them. One is, and what did they say when you brought this up with them? Which I love, because it's not, did you bring it up with them? It implies the expectation that, of course, if you're talking to me, you've already spoken to them. And she also asks the question, what did you do to help? And so I love those questions that puts the ball right back in their court.
I love that. I mean, so much of what we should be doing is it's sort of like teaching a person how to fish, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to giving them the fish. And if every time we go in and swoop in and save the situation, then we've done nothing to educate so that they can proactively prevent that similar situation from happening again.
Yeah.
And if we really believe in empowerment, then we have to give them the tools and have the accountability for that. So I'm with you 100% on that one as well. And I don't know that I've ever thought of myself as a savior exactly. That's a really uncomfortable mantle, but I totally get what you're saying there.
I know I'm talking to myself, right? As I definitely have the temptation to step in because I see things clearly. I am going to be able to help them, right? See what I see. It's I relate to you folks who may step in that way. And what you're saying about teaching a man to fish, it reminds me of a study that I read a while back, maybe in your very publication, that that managers spend on average 20% of their time dealing with conflict. And so, as somebody in HR, encouraging your managers to do likewise, 20% of your time on conflict, that's like saying, all right, Tuesday is conflict day. So we're not going to get any work done on any Tuesday. We're just going to come in and deal with conflict every Tuesday, all day. That is not a good use of time.
Although I would counter that and say, I would rather hear that someone is actually meeting conflict head on than avoiding it altogether.
Yes. Yeah.
So
if there is no
not
conflict,
that's
you've
right.
got a problem.
That's exactly. There's a healthy tension. The right that candor can get you versus just putting your head in the sand and saying, well, we'll just park that and we're not going to deal with it today.
All right. We are simpatico so far, so I look forward to hearing your second suggestion.
Okay. So I think this one is particularly relevant given where we are, and it's backing down on DEI. There are organizations that are, as we speak, dismantling wholesale their teams or cutting their budgets or at least trimming back for fear of backlash or legal risk or some sort of moral high ground that someone else is going to take. And I firmly believe that history will be on our side. We know empirically that diversity, difference of thought, various perspectives improves organizational performance. We know that to be true. And my fear is that we are allowing a vocal minority to intimidate us. And if we were all to come together and double down on these efforts, and that's probably a term that's been overused, but if we were, we would win the day. And I think it's our moral and our social imperative to do that. I mean, it is sort of foundational to, if I may, what the United States is, right? We were formed so that people could find tolerance, they could find opportunity, they could bring their best selves. And we were celebrated as a nation of a melting pot. And now for some reason, that's a liability. It's something to be feared. It's something to be combated. And I think that we need to step up and stand forward and stand together in this effort.
I think that's really valuable, and the idea that history will be on our side. I think I'm with you 100% on that. I'm gonna reemphasize the business value. It's going back to your first point about having business savvy here. The business value of diversity is dismissed by the folks who are saying DE&I creates inequity. Yes. As if advancing someone into a position simply because they aren't like everybody else on that team, for example, not simply, but that to let that even be more than a tiebreaker is just like letting a skill be more than a tiebreaker, because there is direct value in diversity of history, diversity of background leads to diversity of thought, and diversity of thought leads to better outcomes.
Yeah,
not to mention the ways in which having diverse teams just kind of warms the cockles of my heart. That's separate entirely from this real, tangible, bottom line value.
Absolutely. And to be sure, as as a woman who's a person of color, I don't want to be anybody's token. I don't
Really
want to be
different.
here because I make the organization's metrics look good. I want to be here because I add value.
There you
And
go.
my value comes from having a different lived experience than anybody else who came before me or the people who will come after me. And there is a
Yes.
place for every color stripe. There is a place for the dominant, and there is a place for those who are underrepresented. And together, right, that's where we find strength. So this one is something I'm deeply passionate about, and a lot of where I spend my free time.
Terrific. I share your passion.
Excellent.
All right. My next suggestion: beware adding to your handbook. There are so many companies that I've been in where, John came in only wearing one shoe, and he went through his. I mean, of course, this is not a true story, but it might as well be. John came in wearing only one shoe, and it created a furor, and he maybe even fought for his ability to have this self-expression. And so into the handbook goes a policy: you must wear two shoes to work every day, whether you're client facing or not client facing. They put in a policy to address this one-off experience. Even cell phones, no cell phones on the sales floor in a retail operation. That doesn't have to be a written policy, just because lots of people in a younger generation maybe don't have that already as part of their understanding, as part of their ethic, that you will end up with a tome of a handbook if you try to solve every problem with a new policy and try to create a handbook that is foolproof.
Doesn't exist. And in fact, this almost made my list, Aaron. Not to be beholden to policy was the way I had expressed it, but it's absolutely the same thing. We have a handbook because it captures those things that we are legally required to have. And I still think it's too thick. I would rather it just be do what's lawful and use your common sense. Honestly, that's what I think the whole handbook should be, because very few cases are cookie cutter. I mean, even to the point of attendance, right? Given the way and where and how work is done, your presence at work is different than it was 2 years ago. And it's just too much dang work to constantly update a handbook. And so I'd much rather just rely on people doing the right thing and doing it consistently and doing it transparently than, to your point, having to account for every single circumstance, because you're going to get tripped up by a technicality anyway.
I love that you're going to get tripped up by a technicality anyway. I think one of the things that happens is these handbooks evolve in order to prevent the need for leaders in the organization to simply come forward and have the conversation, and the fear of being labeled as having playing favorites or different rules for different people, and those are all real concerns. Litigating it, that's not going to be the effective, human, strong solution. It's going to be a solution for making your company more and more bureaucratic and look more and more like a dysfunctional government.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think your point about the person with one shoe, what happens if someone has a prosthetic leg and they literally don't need the second shoe, right? I mean, policies should not be written for the one-off case, right? They should be written so that people generally understand how we operate, what are our values, and how do we make decisions. And so I think less is definitely more in this case.
You just made me think of the unintended consequences that we see from so much employment law, right? All of the laws that have been put in place with good intentions and then unanticipated consequences. Lorianne Lee loves your do what's lawful and use good common sense. It reminds me of at least at one point, Patagonia's employee handbook said, and I think this was about it said, use your best judgment. And when Mary Barra took over GM, she took their 14-page dress code and changed it
That's
to dress appropriately.
totally.
That's going to require conversations about what's appropriate. And these conversations, even the ones that are contentious, are what build strong relationships in your organization.
Yeah, and I mean, those are the kinds of behaviors we should be modeling. So let's talk it through. Let's understand the diversity of perspectives. And you know what? Maybe that policy stinks. And
Yeah.
maybe we should throw it out in lieu
Yeah.
of something that just feels so much more humane versus assuming that people don't know to come into work with two shoes. Maybe
Yeah.
they have a really good reason for that. I don't know. One of the things I'd like to dismantle is, for example, bereavement policies. I think it's
Oh,
really archaic that we can tell people that they can only take so much time to grieve and that these are the only people that they can mourn. I know that when I had to put my last dog down, I was a wreck. I was a wreck. And
mhm.
I worked at a place where they said, it's okay, Angela.
Do what you need.
Take
Yeah.
take some time, right? And so that's common sense. That's real compassion, right?
That is real compassion. What do you, Angela, need right now? That's
That's right.
compassion. And the pendulum swing from there is when you get back from bereavement leave, and I've seen this policy, bring us an obituary. We need to see that that's where you were. And Lorianne suggests that all of this requires trust. And ain't that the truth? And trust is a verb, right? It's not just I feel trust. It's not just a noun. It is an action. I give you trust. There's no way you can earn my trust unless I give it to you.
So that's really interesting, Aaron. If I can tag off of that, in a professional setting, I like to think of trust as implied. I pay you, I get paid.
There you
The
go.
company assumes that on day one, I'm going to act in a way that is trustworthy and that I am trusting of others.
Yes.
Until I have done something to break that trust, then I need to rebuild it. And perhaps I can, and perhaps I can't. But building trust normally takes a really long time. We don't have that kind of time in organizations. Right. So I'm just going to treat you like an honest person. I'm going to give you grace and you will reciprocate. And we will just assume that there is trust there already because we're professionals and we're going to show up and do the right thing.
I will entrust you, right?
That's right.
You're giving me the keys and yet you're handcuffing me in all of these other ways. It's bizarre.
That's incongruous. Yeah. Doesn't make sense.
All right, Angela, we could talk about this, I'm sure, all day. And we owe the people 8 ways to avoid common HR sand traps today. No apologies here. So we need to, we're going to move on to I think we're at your 3rd suggestion now.
Okay. So fear of AI. I had the opportunity to meet the head of people for OpenAI. And one of the things that she really impressed upon me is, just get in and play with it, explore with it. You're not going to break it. So unless you do something really silly like posting people's salaries or personally identifiable information, right? There's nothing you can do that is irretrievable. And the fact of the matter is that I believe that you will not lose your job to AI, but you will lose your job to people who know AI better than you.
Preach.
And right now, adoption of AI is largely in the hands of people who are already sort of inclined to take on technology. It is also largely in the hands of white men. So the rest of us have to get in there. We have to play. Use it to build your packing list. It doesn't even have to be in the work context. Just begin to familiarize yourself with it. Do one of those things where you ask it to produce a Pixar-inspired picture of your dog. Right? Again, it doesn't have to be build me a scheduling, tool that'll help me coordinate all my interviews. Just try it. And I think HR should actually be leading the way because it gets at the very heart of the next generation of skills that we're going to be expecting.
I absolutely love this. There is AI out there specifically designed for HR. We had until very recently, the CEO of a company called Textio, which uses AI to help you figure out how your job descriptions are either deliberately or accidentally discriminating
Oh,
or even causing people of color and other minorities to discriminate
not the
out,
one.
right? To maybe even unconsciously say, this is not the one for me. This is not the place for me. So AI can be your friend. One of the things that I've been doing with AI, people are talking about AI as this great writing instrument. I think it's terrible at writing. It makes everything sterile and boring. What it is really good for with me, and you might try this, folks, is I will tell it, I want you to critique and not edit the following job description. Email to a client who has this circumstance. And its critique of my writing is far better than its writing and has improved my writing.
Hmm. So I've used it to combat blank page anxiety.
Mm,
Just get me started. I will
I love
work
it.
on the tone, the voice, even the vocabulary, but just get me started. Give me an outline. Because that saves me a lot of time, because I will spend probably a good 15 minutes just staring at the blinking cursor. And then the more it blinks, the more, the more antagonized I get by it. But AI can definitely be a friend in that effort.
I love it. All right. My third suggestion is something that, because of the last part of our conversation, Angela, I've been sitting on and kind of like biting my tongue. Um, Carefully study your handbook for incongruence with your core values. There are a lot of companies that I've been in who have asked me to help figure out, how do we build trust? Why don't we have more trust? And what I've found is, on almost every handbook I've ever opened, it says, for example, that these companies, many of them say, our core value is trust, and we don't have trust. And every page of the handbook says in one way or another, we don't trust you as far as we can throw you. Study your handbook for incongruence with your core values. We had a client who took the stuff, Angela, that you were talking about, that's, we legally need to include this. That was one handbook. Like, hey folks, here's the stuff we're legally required to inform you of and get your consent upon. And then here's the handbook we want to give you.
Huh.
Uh, so many handbooks say on the very first page, welcome. Now, don't get comfortable, because we could fire you at any time for any reason. And I know, because most of you are probably in at-will states, that's something you need to include. Does it have to be front and center? Does it have to not include some kind of preamble that this is something that we legally need to bring to your attention? And we do want you to get comfortable, and we don't anticipate ever using this. It is it's remarkable to me how much the message is ignored, the message beneath the message. And I'll give you one quick example of how this has played out even before I got into work. When I was in high school, and it was a small parochial school, 24 kids, all of us from a religious background, and we were told, don't cheat. We'll be watching you like hawks. If you cheat, you will get a 0. It was a game to us. Everybody in my class, every single person in my class cheated. And then I went to college, where the rule was, they called it the honor code. And the rule was, professors are not permitted in the exam room. They cannot watch you like a hawk. They cannot watch you at all. And then at the end of our exam, we wrote a pledge essentially saying, I didn't cheat. I never saw cheating. My college roommate was on the honor board, so he saw all the cases of cheating that came through the college at all. In 4 years, there was just a handful out of thousands of people, rather than just 24.
That gets back to the implied trust, right? How powerful that is.
People will live up to or down to your expectations of them, and you're not aware of all the ways that you are communicating what you expect.
And I think sometimes we forget that our employees at home, our CEO, COO, CFO, doctor, therapist, entrepreneur, right? They have these giant outsized responsibilities. And suddenly we think they check all that at the door. And that's incumbent upon us to extend to them the respect that they deserve, to honor that they have all these skills, beneath the waterline that we're not even aware of. And
I
so
love how you put that so much, Angela, that I would like you to repeat it.
Oh no.
I'll give you a cue, right? About all of the roles that people play in their home lives. The
Yes.
people in their home lives are what?
Yeah, everything, right?
Yeah.
They're your entire C-suite. They are HR. They are CF. They're managing their finances. They're planning out for retirement. They're taking care of their parents. They're taking care of their children. They are living really full, robust, and sometimes lives that require an incredible amount of gravitas. And then we give them this tome, this handbook that says, you obviously can't think for yourself. So here it
Yes.
is in 60 pages.
Yeah. Let us infantilize you.
That's right. And we will pay you for that privilege, right? So at Harvard Business Publishing, our core values are do what's right, do what's hard, and do it with excellence, in that order. Like the
I love
sequence
it.
actually matters. And I think what's been really so gratifying about that is they've been in place about 2 years now, and you won't see them on a sign. They're not on placards. They're not, they're not posted anywhere. And they are invoked organically. They are embedded in our people processes in terms of when we hire someone, when we talk about, how they're doing in the year, and in performance management conversations, we talk about that. We have awards where we honor people who have manifested the trifecta, and it has really begun to govern the way we talk about what looks good, and it's been so inspiring. And it all sort of came from a grassroots. When we went to revisit our values about 2 years ago.
Yeah. And I love that you're providing awards, you're providing recognition for these things because you get what you measure. If you're not measuring your core values, you're not going to get them.
Yeah. If you don't hold people accountable, then then they might as well just be words on a wall.
Right. Okay. Wonderful. Angela, before we get to your fourth suggestion, how might people get a hold of you, and what might they want to get a hold of you for?
Well, I am the only Angela Cheng Semini on LinkedIn, so that makes it really easy. And people might want to reach out to me just to continue this riff. I am constantly in pursuit of really stimulating conversations. I would love to hear what other people are practicing, what they found success with. And it's always good just to hear from somebody new.
Great. And so what is your fourth suggestion for the good people at home?
Failure to serve as the organization's conscience. Now, we talked about, Aaron, about not being the savior and not constantly intervening. But we are the only function that has this specifically as its remit. Or that is to say, the roles that I have inhabited have had this be one of the major responsibilities. There should be a tension in the organization around what's right for the business and what's good for people. And, I think it was Richard Branson who said, if you take care of the people, they will take care of the business. And I really believe in the direction of that. You start with the people and the business outcomes will follow. And I think we have to constantly remind our leadership, ourselves, our board, our key stakeholders that sometimes doing what's right means sacrificing short-term gains. Sometimes it is really, really hard. But again, much like the DEI, history will prove itself out that when we do the right thing, that when we live by our values, that we are true to who we are and to each other, that we will have done our job at the end of the day. And I'm still hearing too many stories about HR departments who can't do that or won't do that, right? Why are we still hearing about the way in which HR departments are laying people off? I don't understand why we don't stand up and say, no, we are not going to call a Zoom meeting and fire people, 100 people all at once. And oh, by the way, have it be a blank screen. And oh, by the way, I've never talked to you before in my life.
Yeah.
That to me is unconscionable.
Me
and so
too.
We have to serve as the cultural steward. We have to fly that flag.
Lorianne is asking, and I'm thrilled, Lorianne, that you're here to help us go deeper on these. Can you please repeat what you said about what's right for business and people? Was it take care of people?
Yes. So if you take care of people, they will help you take care of the business, right? So if you create an environment that's hospitable, that's invested in their growth, that is willing to have candid and hard conversations with them, they will understand what it is they need to do. They will understand that they have a right to fail. They will be celebrated when they succeed. And all of those things lead to great business outcomes. I think
Another
sometimes we
way that I've
overcomplicate.
heard it put is, not customer first, our
Mhm.
people, employees first, so that they can put the customer first.
Customers first.
And how valuable an insight that is. When you talk to veterans who have done unbelievable things to their own, to put themselves in danger on behalf of their platoon mates. There was no calculus. It's not, oh, well, I'm older than these guys, and so if I'm the one to be killed, I've lived more of my life than they have, or they've got kids and I don't. There's none of that thinking. There is instead simply, I am taken care of. And so I don't have to worry about me because everybody else is worrying about me for me. And so the calculus that so many of us go through in circumstances where we don't feel that profound intrinsic trust, that goes away for your employees when they are so well taken, when they are put first, so that they can put each other and the company first, and
Mm.
the customer.
It's perfectly well said. And it's not to say that I fall on my sword for every single thing, right? I
Right.
have to pick and choose my battles. That's sort of the strategy of working inside an organization and being just one voice. So I am very discreet around when I choose
Mhm.
to pull out the megaphone. But I have been in organizations where I've gotten to the point where it matters and it is no longer about my political health in the organization. It's simply about doing the right thing.
Mm.
And if it means dire consequences, meaning if it means I have to leave the organization, I'm ready and willing to do that because there's only so far that I can compromise before it diminishes who I am and what I believe in.
Indeed.
And I totally acknowledge that that comes from a place of privilege. Not everybody can walk away. Um, but I do think it's an important conversation that we need to have with ourselves. How much of myself am I giving up, on behalf of this organization that may or may not care about me in equal parts?
Yeah. I think there's another side to this same coin of, you suggested we be the conscious of the organization. The other side of that very same coin is, it's the CFO's job to be the financial steward of the organization. And so, just as you want grace for when you step forward and say, I don't think this is right, you've got to have grace for the CFO or for anybody else who is doing their job to say, it's not that the CFO or whoever it is, I'm just picking on CFOs at the moment. It is their job to be guardianing the finances. And so that tension is how the system has to work. They do need to step forward and perhaps suggest things that aren't right, so that you can then push back and together the organization can figure out what is the way through. We are all doing the roles that are ours to do. And what you hope for is a CFO, is other leaders in the company who will hear you, not those who will never make suggestions that fly in the face of our values.
Yeah, and I that is my hope for everyone who's listening to this, is that you will also find yourself in the company of people who share your values, so that not everything is a fight, but maybe just a really intense
Yes,
conversation to get to the
I love
best
it.
solution.
Yeah. Yeah, and that bringing up the things that we're at the end of the day going to say, no, this is just not right. We can't go there. That's healthy.
Yeah,
Just like we
yeah.
have those thoughts, right? We have
Absolutely.
internally, we have some of these thoughts where we go, no, I just can't go there,
Can't
when we're
do it.
tempted to deceive, right? For example. Okay. Folks, reasons to get a hold of me. If you want to build trust in your organization, we can help you engineer trust into the fabric of your organization so that people and profits rise together. We can help train your team to communicate and collaborate effectively, your leaders to lead effectively. Uh, we can help train you to solve problems like these problems of conscience that we've just been discussing. That's the work that I think I have been put here to do, and it is my great privilege to come into companies and help address some of these issues and take great teams and make them still greater together. How you can reach me? You can find me at theyesworks.com. And as Angela Cheng Simony is the only Angela Cheng Simony on LinkedIn, I also am the only Aaron Schmuckler on LinkedIn. So you can find me there and reach out with a little note telling you why you're wanting to connect. My fourth suggestion is kind of zooming in on one spot of previous suggestion about carefully studying the handbook for incongruence with your core values. And this suggestion is trash the PIP. The performance improvement plan is garbage. And this is where I get a lot of fight from folks in HR saying, well, then what do? We need this. The reason that I say trash the PIP is that it was designed not to improve anybody's performance, and form follows function. It was designed for CYA, and until you dismantle it entirely and build it back new, it is always going to be an infantilizing instrument. Imagine this. You come home to your roommate or you come home to your spouse and they slide a memo across the kitchen counter that says, to retrain you, remember, you must not leave your underwear on the bathroom floor or your socks, right? And then you're required to sign it. This is not something that we do in trusting relationships, which is not to say that you don't have that conversation. It's not to say that you don't document that conversation for your future reference, for their future reference, to have a record of what the agreement was. The PIP, as designed, in my view and in my experience, is an infantilizing document. And we should all be on a performance improvement plan. I'm the CEO of my company. I am on a plan to improve my performance. And so that is my final suggestion.
Ooh, RIP to the PIP.
I'm making a meme with quoting you there. I love it.
Well, I have to say, Aaron, you've given me a lot to think about, because we use the performance improvement plan. It's an interesting take that you've given me to consider, because in some ways, by the time we've gotten there, trust has been broken, right? There's something about the relationship that has gone sideways, where I'd like to believe the manager has entrusted the employee with some job to be done, and there's a failure of will, there's a failure of competence. And so it has then become escalated such to a point that we get to that. But yeah, very few people go into that conversation thinking that they actually have a genuine chance to turn it around. I mean, it is sort of the last stand. So by its very nature, chances of success are limited.
Yeah.
But if we're really intending on making things better, if our goal is really improving,
it's a conversation.
Then that needs to be revisited. I love that.
And if folks, if you would like to learn from me, like what do I suggest instead that your employment attorneys will celebrate? By all means, reach out. I am not, people sometimes see this and they think I'm going to be soft on performance issues, that I think there should never be what you might think of as negative consequences for certain behaviors or failures to perform. Nothing could be further from the truth. I have fired people, and it's always been a conversation. And it's always been conversations that have led up to it, some of them documented. The last person that I fired said, I just want to take a moment and say, profoundly thank you. And he was a remote employee and said, I think of you as my online business dad. Was he on and he was never required to sign a document that I could then later take to some judge or some court to prove that he knew it was coming. Your employment attorneys will very likely, if you learn what we substitute the PIP with, would be very likely to support it. And I guarantee you, your people will like it better.
All right. We're going to have to talk about that offline. I am very, very curious and open to rethinking that. I love it. Thank you, Aaron.
Terrific. Well, Angela, it's been a privilege to have you on the show with me. And I've learned from you. This has been a great conversation. Lorianne, thanks for all your comments. And everyone else, thank you for joining us. I trust that this has been valuable to you. Take a moment, think to yourself, what has been most useful in this conversation today? And what today or next week, maybe you think about it, take some notes over the weekend. What can you do about it so that you are avoiding the common HR sand traps today? Bye, everybody.
Terrific. Thank you.